talking too much is not the problem. It's the whole point of the NFJ being who they are. It's an access point for them to feel seen in the world, to regulate the world, to, if you want a metaphor, they're always carrying like a big bag full of like shit, right? And they have to like dump it out to find the lip balm or I don't know what things that people carry in their bags. But, like to be an NFJ in the world, every type, all of the 16 types has their own worldview, way of seeing, feeling, thinking, all of that stuff. But the NFJ specifically is about absorbing the field. It's about the field. It's what's happening in the environment, what's happening in the field that comprises of people and their facial expressions and their needs and their wants and their values. It's other referenced. It's absorbing all of these things. And it usually has feelings about how other people are feeling the things. And it's willing to yield and be mutually influenced in order to influence. And so that is a lot of shit to take in just by existing. And so the easiest way to organize those thoughts and those feelings, the easiest way to kind of regulate and ground is to talk. And so NFJs will approach this need to talk in different ways. Some of them do accept the common role that is given to the NFJ, which is basically the silent, invisible laborer, emotional laborer, mental laborer, right? Quietly hold space. Usually the NFJ who does this doesn't necessarily have an opinion per se, unless there's like a minimum threshold of disharmony that's been reached. And then they need to take action or they need to have a conversation, which I suppose is a form of taking action. But the talking is authentic for them. And there's a lot of talking because there's a lot of things that the NFJ is holding. Unfortunately, they may also have judgments about what they're holding. They may have judgments about what they're talking because they're always primarily tracking the impact on the field of the other person. However, I want NFJs to get to a point where they can just realize like they need to have that conversation, to own it within themselves, to understand that it is a non-negotiable. It's a core need and a core value, but a core need for their mental, emotional health. Otherwise, and this correlates with people in caregiving work and people that are traditionally in feminized labor or emotional laboring, right? There's a higher incidence probably of autoimmune disease and anxiety and depression because you're just holding all of that stuff and there's no release. There's no vessel for it to go through. One barrier is that most people might reflexively judge the NFJ as talking too much. And since the NFJ is open to the relational field, it's willing and eager to be influenced, it might internalize and identify as talking too much. It's aware of the impact on the other person. And so they will identify as too much. And so they have this thing that keeps happening, which is the talking and the externalizing and the verbalizing, and it's a need. But then they also have this holding of what I'm doing and what I can't not do is too much. And so there's a shame. Shame is a very common go-to for, I would say, probably all FJ types, because, shame is about the social field. Social and relational field kind of overlap, right? How things look. So we have to de-shamify the talking and the verbalizing while also understanding that there might be many, many people that don't have the capacity to witness, to hold, to not judge, because the same way that the NFJ holds all of this shit, the same way that when the NFJ verbalizes it to another person, hoping that there will be a witness in a mirror, that person now is holding all of that shit. And most people, not being NFJs, they don't see all of this, they don't feel all of this, they're too busy in their own experience. And then the shame compounds because an effort was made consciously or unconsciously to express the self authentically, and it was rejected. And social rejection upticks shame, and it compounds this low self-worth, which we'll probably talk about in other videos. But the whole point is, if the NFJ can really own this as a non-negotiable, they can kind of preemptively, having trouble communicating, enunciating, articulating, but the NFJ can preemptively create its own system for self-care, which it has to include some sort of externalization. if they can find at least one person that's willing to just listen to them talk as much as they need without judging, that would be great. That would be ideal. However, the NFJ can also kind of have a sort of substitute or kind of have another option in the form of writing. Now, another barrier to writing is it's a lot easier to talk all the things in your head versus writing. Your hand might cramp. You feel like you can't get all the things out perfectly. So there is a process. Usually I find a lot of NFJs, they always come back to me and they're like, yeah, I didn't get to it, or I couldn't do it for the whole time, or I don't really like my handwriting. There's a perfectionism that creeps in that prevents the writing from happening. And then the talking or the not talking happens. And the NFJ is always slightly holding this crispiness. I had a client say this crispiness or this stress that can come out in ways that ironically creates more disharmony because it hasn't been dealt with. It's been brewing under the surface. So again, talking is not a problem. It's the whole point of regulation and connecting and clarifying. If only the NFJ would start to find themselves worthy enough to claim this need and meet it regularly and primarily and not let it accumulate in the background and cause all of the issues that it's trying desperately to get ahead of.